Good afternoon, everybody. We are doing a Formula One show today. I'm filling in for Mike. This is James. We're going to be covering some of the events that have gone on in the past week, along with the good old Japanese Grand Prix, which is happening this week, though it's one of the earlier times on the schedule that has been around. But let's start off with some news from the last week in Formula One. Of course, ask any questions you guys might have as we go along, and we'll do whatever we can to answer them, keep you informed. All right. Uh, let's see. As everyone remembers, Max ended the race as a DNF in the Australian GP 2 weeks ago. What happened? Looks like his brake caliper locked up. They dug into it and turned out to be a little bit more than that. And it turns out that they somehow were not, they did not have the proper upright on the car somehow. They had a wrong build spec for the upright. So that led to the error. Evidently, they must have been off by a small amount because oddly enough, they were able to put the upright on the car and everything fit on it. But evidently, it was just off by enough where it caused a problem with the brakes. And they figured this out during the um, during Saturday qualifying and FP3 that they were having some problems. They couldn't figure out on the rear end of the car, especially like I said on the upright, which is basically the suspension member in the rear where the brake calipers were attached to. So they were looking through it, trying to figure out what happened, and I don't think they figured it out until after the race that they had the wrong build on there. They didn't have the proper thing. They must have changed something, and it changed by a few millimeters, and that caused a problem. And whatever the effect was, it caused the brakes to lock up, and basically didn't have enough. It didn't have the clearances that it did, and it forced the brakes. The closing either didn't let them come undone, or it just kept them where it kept getting hotter to where basically the caliper and the pads joined together and started throwing off the smoke that we saw. That's kind of an odd thing. That's something you really run into, and I see very much in Formula One. Lots of there's lots of checks and balances that you go on, and process sheets and documentation that you've got to make sure that you've got the right parts on there. I don't know if it was one single part or it was a combination of parts that was wrong in there. I haven't heard anything more from the Red Bull team on it, but it's really interesting how that happened. And it's in some ways it kind of seems almost like a rookie mistake to kind of make that error where they basically wound up putting something wrong on the car, but they did, and it led to what happened with the brakes. So evidently, as I said earlier, the brake manufacturer, contrary to what I said earlier in last week's show, was I thought it might have been something with the brake manufacturer, but it turns out nope. Turns out it was a Red Bull generated error. They did the three putt, they did the bogey themselves on that one. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of remediation training for people and making sure their documentation is correct, to make sure they have the proper processes in place, to make sure that that doesn't happen again. They don't get the wrong specs on it. They don't tighten the bolts to the wrong torque, or if it was something like that. But definitely will be something that they're investigating, and will prevent from happening again. Like I said, it's just an odd thing to happen. I don't know if they get lackadaisical because they've won 3 world championships in a row, and they're look at a strong team for a fourth, or if it was something, new person was involved, they changed somebody. You remember with 24 races, the teams are getting tired. There's lots of people, and a lot of the time they are now going to be swapping team members out for certain races. Not everybody will be going to all races because it puts a stress on the team members' families. In addition, the team members themselves for doing 24 races, where the majority of them, probably 23, are going to be flyaway. I would assume that Silverstone British Grand Prix will be a drive-to race, but the rest of the races are going to be anywhere from a 45-minute to a 14-hour flight from England, where Red Bull and most of the teams are based. Of course, Ferrari's in Italy, and the old Sauber team, I think, still is based in Switzerland, though with Audi ownership, that's probably going to either move to Germany, but they also have a facility um, in in the UK, I believe. And the Alpine team is French, but they have a facility both in France for engines and for the car manufacturing, and the main headquarters is in Enstone in the UK. But like I said, it's anywhere from a 45-minute to 13, 14-hour flight for all of the team members for every flight. 24 now this year, the longest race year in history, and that could have led to some what happened here, where it could have been a new person who wasn't familiar with it. Could be somebody who's tired, coming through too many time zones to get to Australia. Could have been a process problem. Don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they share any more as to what happened on that end. If to exactly dig into a little bit more, it'd be interesting to find out, because that's not your common error that you're going to run into very often. It's just kind of odd what they did, where they obviously got, you know, it's just weird, because generally if you're going to miss by that much, you're going to have something that's just not going to fit, and it's going to be broken from the whole, from the get go. It's not going to fit together that closely where it actually works. But you've got one thing wrong or two things wrong that create the tolerance problem that's going to lead to brakes locking up on it. Generally, it's just not going to fit. It's like if you bought the wrong size garage door and tried to install it. No, you're going to miss by, they don't make garage doors that are within, a 5 millimeter difference of each other. It's, they're inches or feet. And I guess, maybe it's a little different with F1 components, but they somehow managed to get the car together, and it ran. It ran in FP1, ran FP2, ran FP3, ran fine in qualifying. Wasn't until the race where this thing popped up, which is even makes it a little bit stranger. Because remember, the cars are in parc fermé condition once they go to qualifying these days. You cannot change car. You cannot make any changes to the cars or the wings or anything on them without the approval of the FIA, and that will only be granted for a broken part or a damaged part. And you need to bring that back to the FIA and pitch your case and prove to them that you're going to replace the part like for like. You can't upgrade. You can't put, you can put a new part on if one's broken, but and also if it's a part that is limited. There are certain parts like engines and batteries and so on that are limited, so you get X number of them per year or per race season. So if you do one of those, you're going to probably take a grid penalty and go to the back. If, for example, a mirror gets broken because somebody did something and they leaned on it, and the mirror snapped off, highly unlikely, they're carbon fiber, they're strong, but let's say something breaks, sure, you can replace that, especially a mirror, because it's a very integral safety component. But you have to do it like for like, you need to get FIA approval, and you got to show them the stamps of the parts that they're legitimate, and that that they've been approved and all that. So it's it's odd that they would have gotten to that point, um, to where they would have, they would have not swapped a part out and got to this failure, but they were able to get through qualifying without a problem, like I said, in 3 rounds of practice. But all of a sudden on Sunday it failed. So have to keep an eye on it. I don't know. That is a definitely a strange one. Can't really remember when that has happened before, but so be it. And it did. So, all right. One of the other issues in Melbourne was Lewis Hamilton's engine shut down on him. And I was suspecting that when it shut down, it was a failsafe on the engine and the software that would stop it before it would blow itself up, before it would be damaged beyond repair, where they might be able to go in and fix it. But evidently I was incorrect on that. The engine was not recoverable according to the Mercedes team. That is one of his, I believe, 4 engines that is tossed. They lost from the pool. He's got 4 engines for the year. So you have to figure they're averaging 24 races, 4 engines. You got to average about 6 races per engine, for the, to basically balance them out. And that's obviously probably with some tolerances, probably 20 or 30% more, that the engines are built to last, because you still have practice and other things. You've got to account for that too. So Lewis has moved on to the second engine for the year. Not a critical thing though. We're only, we're going into the 4th race and you're on your second engine, so you're a little behind on the average area. You're not getting as many out as you want to. You didn't get the 6 out of that one. And Saudi's a fairly high speed track. Bahrain, kind of. None of those are really tough engine tracks. Monza's a tough engine track. Canada can be a tough engine track. But none of those races are really that difficult on the engines. So it's disappointing they had to pull from the second one. They didn't go into too many details as to what specifically went wrong with it, but they said it was not repairable, that the engine was comprehensively broken. And which is why I was hoping that it might have saved itself, because there's a lot of fail-safe software in the cars these days that basically, because of the fact you've got to run engines for X number of races that they were going to, maybe they were going to get away with it and be able to fix some minor components on the part, or maybe it could have been a bad sensor that they would go ahead and fix and find out the engine wasn't going, the engine wasn't out of tolerances. It was okay. It just happened to be that, hey, the sensor failed and threw a bad and erroneous error in the engine. Software said, oh, that's out of spec. We got to shut the engine down and save it. But unfortunately, it's not. So they're going to move on to the second engine. As everyone knows, bad weekend for Mercedes in general in Melbourne. Lewis with the engine, George with the crash, while he got quote unquote brake checked by Fernando, wasn't paying attention. He said he was looking down at that point and lost control of the car and then hit the wall, and then the wheel caught underneath and rolling the car over. Car didn't, I mean, technically the car rolled over. It left them in a very vulnerable spot in the track. Very dangerous situation. They went to a VSC virtual safety car to protect George, but and then wound up getting him out of the car. It was on the penultimate lap, second to last lap of the race. So there were questions if they should have red flagged it or not. But yeah, so Lewis down one engine. It's something to watch as we go forward to see if this is going to be a problem for Mercedes. One of the things was asked him because it was warmer in Melbourne than it was in a little bit more than it was in Bahrain, and maybe about the same as it was in Saudi Arabia. And the kind of a question for for one of the higher reps in the team I heard asked this week was, well, does your car like cold better than warm? Does your car run better in cold conditions than it does in the warm conditions, or does it run equally at both, or does it matter? And they're going, well, they weren't really sure. And of course, we like to optimize their car across all weather conditions. But as from what they know so far, they think maybe it might be a car that runs better in cold conditions than warm conditions, and there might be engine issues that are being postulated in higher temperatures, which might have led to the problem that Lewis ran into in Melbourne. So again, folks, something to watch for and see what happens. Chilly this week in Japan. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But and so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. Like I said, on to the second engine for Lewis. Interesting event over at McLaren this week, where the one of the three McLaren technical leads, they created a triumvirate. There wasn't a technical director. All three of them, they're going to handle different areas. One was on track performance, one was design, and one was processors or engineering. And they were all going to report into Andrea Stella, who's the team principal, who reports to Zach Brown, who's the head of McLaren Racing. And a gentleman named David Sanchez, they'd been brought over from Ferrari. They'd also brought over a gentleman named Rob Marshall, who had been brought over from Red Bull. And along with another gentleman, I don't remember his name, who was there, who'd been promoted, was go ahead and Neil Hulde was promoted when they ran their technical director Jim Key out about this time last year because of the poor. If you remember, the McLaren start last year was very shaky. The car did not look very good. They were slow. They weren't Alpine slow, but they were slow, or they weren't Haas slow, but they were underperforming what they were expecting to do. So they had a shakeup. Jim Key was their technical director, left, and they created this office of three technical directors handling different areas. Now, Mr. Sanchez, who joined and left last week, only joined at the start of the year because he was going on what's called gardening leave. I think we talked a little bit about this previously, where when you announce you're going to leave a team, they don't immediately let you go work for the new team because of all the technical information you have about the current car plus next year's car. They make you take what's called gardening leave, and you get paid to sit on the sidelines for 3 months, 6 months, or till the end of the season. David Sanchez's gardening leave was until the 1st of January, which is a common date for lots of these to end. So whatever they've developed since then isn't in his brain. He doesn't go to work. He doesn't use email. He just gets paid to sit home for it. So nice gig if you're working in Formula One. And these guys are not making $20 an hour either. I'm fairly sure they're making significant amounts of money, six figures, probably maybe even the low seven figures for some of these guys. very, very, these are very top of the echelon, top of the, these are leaders, these are guys that make a difference at teams. It makes cars go faster. So the same thing, they brought Rob Marshall over from Red Bull, who was a key component of the Red Bull team. But it's kind of again another odd situation where he got there, and within 3 months he decided nope. He was technical director of car concept and performance. Just what he thought he was going to be doing isn't what they had him doing, and he decided I don't want to do this. He is a eminently hireable person. He can get a job probably fairly quickly with another team. Would love to have his skills. Maybe Ferrari would want him to come back. Maybe somebody else could use his skills. And I don't know what he got to do for gardening leave, but he can definitely spend some time looking for jobs. And he should probably had a couple of offers within a week, I would suspect, or interest from teams would want to talk to him because he's been very successful all throughout his career, especially at Ferrari. And just don't know what happened, why you wouldn't have talked that thing through. I mean, it happens, we've seen it in business every day where somebody gets hired for a job and after 3, 6 months, it just doesn't work out for one reason or another. They didn't think they were going to do something happened and companies changed directions. I've had that before where companies said, you want to hire you for this. And then we get in there after a couple of weeks. It's, oh, by the way, no, we're going to need you to do that because that person left and we need someone to fill in there too. So those things happen. Kind of odd in Formula One because these people tend to they tend to be extremely good at an extremely narrow area of expertise, whether it's aerodynamics, um, whether it is the flow of air through an engine, whether it is designing cars, whether it is um, working with carbon fiber and manufacturing carbon fiber bits, parts, whether it is strength of materials, whether it is battery related technologies that you are a genius with, whether it's software coding for either systems or for track performance or data analytics or something like that. Generally, they're very, very, very smart people that are very, very, they've got PhDs or master's degrees in very narrow areas of expertise. So would have kind of thought that they would have had this sorted out to, you're going to do boom, boom, boom this because you did boom, boom, boom that at Ferrari. Don't know. Didn't happen that way. So they both said, hey, I don't, you came to them and said, hey, I don't think I want to work here because this isn't what you guys said I was going to do. So basically, they've kind of given up the three people. I don't know what's going to happen to Neil, but Rob Marshall's kind of been given the head job. Again, they didn't bring in a technical director; they brought in three technical directors specific areas. So they've kind of thrown that org chart out the window and are going with basically Rob Marshall was technical director of engineering. He is now chief designer, and Neil Holday, who is still there, basically is going to take over as technical director of engineering and report to Rob. And Stella, and then Andrea Stella will handle the performance unit that David Sanchez ran until a permanent appointment's made. So, and there still is Peter Paradmo remains the technical director for aerodynamics. So, again, very civic people, very civic ideas and areas. Again, odd situation. Don't see it happen very often, but we'll see how it is. I'm sure that we will see Mr. Sanchez's name show up somewhere going forward because again, he's eminently hireable and is very, very, very talented at what he does to make a car go faster, and that is extremely important in Formula One, of course. Last news bit was Williams. Again, we've had when we call it chassis gate, tub gate, if we want to call it that, the tub, where they had the problem with Albon crash in Australia. They were not able to repair the tub, being that they thought it would have the better chance of taking points in the race in Australia. They gave Logan Sargent's car to Alex Albon, and he raced. Unfortunately, finished 11th. Didn't quite get there. Almost did. Just a few seconds short of getting points. But they sent the tub that Albon crashed, and he basically put a hole in the part where the front suspension attaches to the car. They said it was the size of a finger. You could stick your finger through it. That went back to England. Arrived there at 2:00 in the morning Monday after the Australian Grand Prix. They got it all patched up. Though there's some, Logan Sargent says the car is fine. and it's got to meet certain aerodynamic or certain tests, crash tests with the FIA, and it passed all of those apparently. But they're going to keep that car with Logan's going to keep running that car, and the tub that Logan's was that went to Albon will stay with Albon. So it's kind of like he's getting Sargent's getting the fixed car, which may have an issue, but they can't. But no one's really saying the repaired car. It's called that. It's called the repaired car. Whereas Albon will get the the current good, not hardly crashed tub, and will be racing that. And they also announced that it will be until the Miami GP race, which is in about a month, I believe, until they get a third tub that they'll use. And they technically won't have a third tub. They'll have the new tub will probably go to either Logan or Albon. Probably go to Albon because those are all made out of carbon fiber. And over time, carbon fiber will lose some of its structural rigidity, and it will bend and flex more slightly. We're talking very, very minuscule amounts. But a rigid car is a faster car than a car that will bend and flex more. So if they stick with the 1-2 concept, Albon being the one driver, Logan being the number 2 driver, they will probably give the brand new tub over to Albon, and then Sargent will get his old tub back that's had at that point I think 5 or 6 races on it. And they'll go from there, and then they'll probably have to build another tub because they only have the damaged fixed repaired tub as their backup. And that'll probably be another couple of races, I would think, until they have 3 brand new undamaged tubs. But who knows what will happen between now and then, as someone can, damage a tub. If the Williams drivers can keep it on the track and not be hitting any walls going for the next couple of weeks, I think that would make James Valves a very happy man. It would make the Williams CFO a very happy person, because that all costs money. Now, the tub doesn't cost you more. That was in the plans. They were going to build a third tub. That's all part of it. They're probably going to build a 4th tub too. They might even build a 5th tub. That's just a time problem more than a money problem. It's a small money problem. That's going to probably cost them $500,000 to $1 million to fix the tub, with the time and the people and the air freighting and all that. Because now they're going to have to air freight it back to Japan, to Suzuka this week from England, because it wasn't part of the regular freight that was shipped, air freighted out of Australia, a week ago Monday to Japan for this weekend's race. So yeah, it's costing them money. Again, not millions, but still, Williams is a team that's gonna, that's gonna be running up right up against the amount, probably, if they're able to spend all the money, if they have enough money coming in. Williams' problem wouldn't necessarily be spending, would probably be having the revenue to cover the cost cap limits. I don't know if they do. I think they're getting pretty close to it if they hadn't, which is what Haas was also working on, which is one of the problems that Gunter had with Haas. But different story, different time. But yeah, Williams not having a new tub until Miami. Albon will keep driving Sargent's old tub, and Sargent's driving Albon's repaired tub. You can't tell the drivers without knowing which tub they've got. All right, hey everyone. Join in. You can play against Mike and I in the F1 Fantasy League Team Hold. Join up and play with us there. It's great fun. You can really see how silly you look. How silly I look. Like I said last time, I forgot to put good old Sainz was in for me, but I forgot to swap him out when he got pulled for the appendicitis in Saudi Arabia, and I lost out on points. That I just got a big fat 0 for that week because it didn't automatically switch out for me. So my problem, my bad. I thought it switched for the driver. It doesn't anymore, but you got to pay attention what's going on there, because different drivers are better at different tracks, and you got to stay on top of it if you're going to win the year, which I may or may not do. Don't know. I got to see where I am in the standings. Haven't checked. I got to set my lineup. Remember, by the way, the lineups lock at the start of qualifying. Qualifying will be 11 o'clock tonight, Pacific time, 2 a.m. For those of you on the East Coast, if you guys stop shaking with earthquakes back there. So yeah, so basically before you go to bed, more than likely, unless you're out staying out late, make sure you set your fantasy lineups. Don't forget about that. That is your fantasy lineup warning. But jumping to the Japanese Grand Prix, we're at Suzuka. Suzuka is a great track. Many drivers think it's their many drivers will say it's their favorite. It has it gives you the impression that you actually are going somewhere, which many of these modern tracks don't. They're just kind of a bunch of straights with a bunch of corners connected to it, which a lot of drivers say that the way that they feel about some of these newer tracks that we've got, or some of the street tracks, you can't really see anything. You just see walls and buildings if you look up. Um, so this track feels like you're actually going somewhere. It is a figure eight track. It is the only figure eight track, and what I mean by that, it looks like a figure eight and it crosses over itself, which no other track in the Formula One circuit does. So that makes it definitely makes it a unique track, and it is near the. If you want to know the crossover points, it crosses about turn 7, I think it is, on just after turn 7 on a straight. It crosses under the track, and then on the other side, it crosses over just after 130R as you're going up that long straight. You can see from overhead shots where it crosses if you're watching them on, well, I guess on either. They tend to do the overhead shot from the helicopter when the cars are running, um, when it crosses under the circuit, not generally when it crosses over the circuit. So that's where you generally see where that happens. But it is interesting watching that. Don't seem to unfortunately get it timed very well, where you got a car going under as a car is going over, which would be kind of cool to see. But they don't generally get doesn't generally get timed out that well. So, but like I said, that'd be a cool thing to look at. But yeah, it's a great track. Been around since the mid '70s, I believe. It is owned by Honda. It is in northern Japan, and this is the earliest they have run. The cherry blossoms are the cherry blossom season is on right now. So you've got them that are at peak looking period. So that's kind of cool. They're blooming right now, and that is quite awesome. It's something where Formula One's never been there this time of the year. This is the earliest it's been of the year. I was talking earlier about about Williams, and whether their car likes a cold, whether it likes it cold or whether it likes it warm. And one of the things that brings reason that brings up this week is because F1 is there so much earlier in the season, is Mercedes-Benz. It is colder. It's about 8 or 9 degrees Celsius cooler than it was in October when they were there. And it also has led to cool and cloudy and a little bit of rain there, and possibly rain on Sunday too. But it is definitely earlier in the season, and it's going to basically, being that it's cooler, can affect the different cars that will be running. And some of the drivers are happy with the cold, and some of the drivers are not happy with the cold because, well, they're used to it being warmer, and their car, this is definitely going to be the coolest race for the year so far, because Japan is, northern hemisphere, but pretty far north. It's probably close to, for American geography, it's pretty close to the Canadian-U.S. border, I suspect, if I remember my geography. Maybe a little bit more, because Tokyo, I think, is similar to Seattle, and it's more than like 120 miles north of Tokyo. It's like an 8-hour train ride, if I'm not mistaken. So, but great track. For the drivers. Like I said, it's a favorite of many of them. Sebastian Vettel, you said his asked science about it. He says it's possibly his favorite track, because it's a real race. Drivers like tracks where they're challenged. They don't like the same corners. They don't like the same things over and over and over. This has got bunches of different corners, and because it's a figure eight, you've got, I think it's 11 turns in one direction and 8 turns in the other. So it's pretty fairly balanced as far as corners, and the tires heat up fairly evenly on the track because you've got almost the same number of lefts and rights. So generally, tracks are either going to be left, are generally going to be where they're either going to be a majority left-hand corners or majority right-hand corners. Yes, it's 11-8, but that's about as well balanced as you'll find on a lot of tracks, because of the fact that this, is basically in a sense, it's not a circular track, but it's a figure eight track. So it'll be cool. It's usually a great race. Unfortunately, as they said, the race is going to start at 10 o'clock Pacific on Saturday evening, which will be 1 a.m. Eastern. So you guys probably won't be staying up for that unless you're really dedicated to Formula One there for you on the East Coast. and it's you're willing to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning. Tonight's no better. Like I said, qualifying starts at 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 a.m. Eastern. So again, you got to be really dedicated, or go out and party. Come back. By the time you come back, by the time you're done partying, hey, it'll be time for Formula One. Let's see. One of the other notes on this: Charles Leclerc is wearing a tribute helmet to Jules Bianchi. For those of you that are not have not been following Formula One for a number of years, Jules Bianchi was a Formula One driver who was critically injured in Suzuka in 2014 when, unfortunately, in a very very rainy, stormy day, his car spun off the track and hit a um, utility truck, and he had a severe brain injury. He was put into a medically induced coma and never came out of the coma and was declared dead in June or July of 2015. Um, and he is actually, I don't know if you call it fortunately or unfortunately, the last fatality in Formula One. And before him, Ayrton Senna, who died in the 1994 crash at Imola, was the um, he was previously the driver that had died in Formula One. So while it is not a obviously 100% safe sport, work is done year after year after year by volunteer groups or groups like the like engineering students at Leeds University and things like that that are all working together to make Formula One a safer sport, and that's critically important. So I mean, knock on wood, it's been since Ayrton Senna's crash, only one driver has died in 30 years yet in Formula One, which is obviously we would say one too many, but overall a fairly decent safety record when it comes to Formula One and making sure the drivers get to go home every day at the end of the race. So 2014, he was in this accident. This is a 10-year anniversary of 2024. They said died in 2015. If you're wondering why Leclerc was, well, because Jules Bianchi was a Frenchman slash Monegasque, I believe. I don't think he drove under the Monegasque flag of Monaco. Monegasque is the what you call people and when you refer to the country. I don't believe he actually flew the Monegasque flag on his car or carried it, but he certainly did have it for for Formula One, and he is also the godfather of Charles Leclerc. So that's why the tribute helmet this week from Charles to Jules for all of what he did. He also was helpful in getting Charles some sponsorship and some backing. Nicholas Todt, who is Jean Todt's son. Jean Todt used to be the head of Ferrari. He was the team principal of Ferrari during the Michael Schumacher glory days and then became head of the FIA after that and served 2 terms there. Also married to actress Michelle Yeoh, um, and who is quite a bit taller than him, if I'm not mistaken. Not that that's, I guess, relevant, but so be it. Mr. Tots, I believe, only about 5'5", 5'6", so to speak. Um, and yeah, so John's son managed Bianchi, and I believe he might managed Leclerc too. But he was his godfather. He reached out, and actually, he was instrumental. Bianchi was instrumental in getting Leclerc some financial backing through the Tots, um, during when he was um, up and coming through the carts through karting. And it's basically he's into, as far as he's concerned, without Jules Bianchi, Leclerc wouldn't be in Formula One. So he donned a tribute helmet. You can go look at it on the internet, but it's a nice tribute to him, and it's well deserved for the work that he did to get Leclerc into Formula One. So it's a very 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 kind and fitting thing for him to do. Unfortunately, we lost Jules Bianchi in 2015 due to that crash. It was the reason why I bring that up. It was also similar to 2 years ago in Japan with the that's why a lot of the drivers freaked out about when there were similar vehicle. It was like a tractor that's multi-purpose. It's got a skip loader on it and stuff. It's very similar to the there actually isn't any video, if I'm not mistaken, of the crash, of Bianchi's crash. There's only him. You see him go off the track and then out of frame behind a barrier, and you can't see the crash. You just see the car disappear and then stop. You don't see what it hit. And but that was why a lot of the drivers were freaking out when there was equipment on the track during that driving rainstorm 2 years ago when they finally red flagged it because of all the rain and the poor visibility. And there were still cars that were going very quick. One car went, I think it was Gasly, went very quickly just past the this thing that was, you know, doing 15 miles an hour on the track, going the opposite direction of the drivers. And there were a lot of them were yelling on the radio, why was that on there? Why hasn't this been red flagged and stuff? And that's some of the rules on why that's not supposed to happen, or because of Joe's Bianchi crash in 2014. So definitely a tragedy. Hopefully not to be repeated again. But again, a lot of the drivers that have memories of that remember that. And that's why they were, they were quite upset about that. But we are racing in Suzuka. FP1 occurred earlier today, though it is Friday here. It was earlier Friday in Japan, and looks like that Red Bull did not put the wrong uprights on the Max's car. Though did have similar results in Australia, so maybe we can't really say that until the end of the weekend. We'll have to see how that pans out. It really is something to keep watching for, guys. Is this, did they, what really happened there? So Max was first, Perez second, 1800ths back, and Sainz was third, 2100ths back. Yuki was ninth. Fourth and fifth was George and Lewis, a little under half a second back of Max, doing better than they did in Australia. Obviously, even they were closer to 10th in practicing and qualifying. Lewis did make it out of did make it out of Q2 in qualifying, if I'm not mistaken, in Australia. So, which brings up the question: it is cooler. It's about 7 or 8 degrees Celsius cooler, maybe 8, 9 degrees cooler in Japan. So, are they? Is this car turning out to be a car that likes cooler weather, which means they're going to have a long summer? If it is, because the Formula One goes to a lot of warm tracks during the summer. So that could be a problem. You need a car that works well over all temperature ranges. Red Bull, quintessential example. They work well over any temperature range, so it appears right now, whether it's hot or whether it's cold. Merc, maybe not so much. Maybe they are more of a car that works better in the cool conditions and not the warm conditions. So again, we'll have to see how that pans out. And again, what's the one team, folks, that doesn't need a crash? Yep, you guessed it, Williams. Logan Sargent crashed it pretty, medium crash, I'd say. Didn't take all 4 corners off like Albon did in Australia, but didn't just damage a wing and keep driving. He, damaged the car, moderately, wouldn't say significantly, moderately. The tub up here is okay from what I've heard so far from Team Williams, and they're going to fix it and he'll be able to run it. Though, man, you guys, not a good time to be hitting stuff. This just really is a bad time. He got a little bit off the track, got into the grass, car spun, and, day over for him. FP2, light rain on and off. Only 13 cars went on track, only 5 recorded times. Now, there is some, as I said, it's been cooler and cloudy. There is a possibility that it could be raining on Sunday for the race, or rain could appear. So I guess some teams went out there and wanted to make sure that they got some experience in the rain, because there is a distinct possibility that it could rain on Sunday. Problem is, with some of these new rules with tire allocations, the teams are down an intermediate set of tires. They don't have, there's 2 types of rain tires. There's intermediate and there's full wets or full rain tires. Intermediates are when it's just kind of spitting, whether it's kind of damp on the track, when they don't have to remove large amounts of waters, when it's not heavily raining, when it's just a light rain, they'll use the intermediates. And also on a track that is going from wet to drying, you would use intermediates. Full rain, when you get a significant rain event, like what happened in Japan a couple of years ago, what happened in Spa in 2021 when they couldn't run because it was just so wet out there. That was actually even beyond the wet weather tires. But they can basically suck an enormous amount of water off of a track. I believe it's something like 500 gallons a minute of water that they can. It's like they can, like on a lap, they will pull enough water to they will basically suck enough water and throw it up into the air, enough water to believe to fill a small swimming pool on a full lap at an average circuit, and when you're running full wets and it's there's enough water to basically, disperse from the track. If you notice when they run that, if it stops raining, if you notice in Formula One, how quickly a dry line will appear, that's because those tires are extremely efficient and what they do. The intermediates less so, but the full range, when it stops raining, man, you can get a 10, 15 laps, you can get a dry line, maybe less depending on the track, maybe 10 at Spa because of the long track, because of the long lap time or the long lap length, and the and the amount of water that they would be bringing up. So it'll be interesting to watch the weather forecast. It's not supposed to be raining during qualifying, but it is supposed to be raining possibly during the race on Sunday. So, but for the cars that did run, Oscar Piastri first, Lewis Hamilton second, Charles Leclerc third. It was a half a second from Lewis to Piastri, and it was 4 seconds from Charles to Piastri. Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bulls, or the V carbs, if you're hip. Those two cars, the blue and white, the formerly Toro Rosso cars, were in fourth and fifth, but something like they were something like 4 seconds down, or no, they were another 2.5 seconds down. Sorry, to Leclerc, so they were 6.5 seconds down to Oscar Piastri. You'll get odd lap times, or not odd, but you get odd spaces when it rains. The cars will not that will spread the cars out significantly. It will not be just like a tenth or two of a second. You get large gaps when you do rain races because of that. And you also get screwy things because certain cars can run better in the rain. So a rainy qualifying is always an interesting qualifying. If you remember, Haas got its one and only pole ever in a rain shortened, or in a rain qualifying in Brazil in 22, I think it was. Basically, they put a time in early in the session, and this dark cloud came across the track and dumped a bunch of rain, and that was it. It wasn't ever going to get dried up, and he happened to put in a good lap time just for the rain hit, and he won the pole for it. So be it. Strange things have happened. But yeah, rainy qualifying is very interesting qualifying. Don't fall asleep on that, regardless of what time of the day it is, because it will definitely be entertaining. It's something to watch. You will get results shaken up, and you can tell by whether it is they won't always declare it, or they won't always necessarily tell that whether it is a wet qualifying session or not. Generally, if it rains, it is, but they will uh, they in the race, if it sorry I was trying to is in the race, if it rains, they don't have to use all three tires. And and like I talked about earlier, they've lost one set of the intermediate tires, so that's why not a lot of the teams went out during the race. But when it does rain in qualifying, you do tend to shake up the um, the qualifying results. So they're always entertaining to see the teams that may or not make it out. And also, it tends to be the track's going to be constantly changing because the rain can lighten up or the rain can get heavier. So if you run early, and if it's raining lightly, you put in a lap early, because then you got a lap in the bank. And if it starts raining harder, the track will go away, and it'll never be as quick as it was when it was lightly raining. More rain means slower times. More water on the track means the cars will run slower. And unless you have a very odd situation where where it just stops raining right at the start, and you guys got a bunch of people who run intermediates or rain tires on there to start creating a dry line, you're never going to get back to dry within a qualifying session normally. It's just not going to happen because the amount of time that it takes to dry a track out. But watch for any rain tomorrow and Sunday. That'll definitely make your race a little more spicy than without the rain. And so for FP2, the official results were Oscar Piastri fastest, Lewis half a second back, and Leclerc 4 seconds back again, like I said, with Yuki and Daniel, fourth and fifth, another 2.5 seconds back, Daniel. But so be it. Anybody have any questions before I kind of get close to wrapping this up? If you do, please throw them into the chat. I can take a look at them. Mike gave me access to do that. But yeah, no, Suzuki should be a great race if you're kind of wondering. Yeah, I mean, the time doesn't work out for most of America. I will probably watch qualifying on tape tomorrow morning, but probably if I don't fall asleep, we'll stay up for the uh, for the race starting at 10 o'clock Pacific on Saturday evening. I'll probably stay up for that. It's not always going to be the longest race unless there's red flags or something, so it should be done in about an hour 35 ish. So I should be able to get to bed by 11:30 ish or so. A little bit past my normal time, but hey, it tends to be a great race, quick circuit. Like I said, drivers love it, and very entertaining for everybody there. So definitely one that if you're kind of on the fence or trying to make time for it, gotta watch Suzuka. It's only figure eight track, good racing, opportunities to pass, long straights, corners you can dive into it, especially the chicane that's just before the final straight. I think it used to be called the Casio chicane at one point. I'm not sure if Casio, quote unquote, still is the sponsor of it. So yeah, so definitely a race to watch, and we'll go from there. Oh, my prediction. Sorry, I got to remember my predictions. I said that we are going to have a return to Red Bull form with Max winning it, Sergio second, and Oscar Piastri third. I predicted a good race for Oscar. He kind of got overshadowed. He had to hold station in Australia, didn't get on the podium in his home race. So I hope he's going to. Get the podium this time. Though with the cold weather, hey, don't count out Mercedes. Maybe George or Lewis can get one. And I'm hoping for a top 10 because it's Japan for both Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo. So, and again, you too can go up against my predictions and Mike's predictions in the F1 Fantasy League. Please join up at f1.com. Formula1.com, F1, F, Formula1.com. Sorry about that. Let me verify. I'm looking at that. Yeah, Formula in the number one.com is where you can go to sign up for that. And it's, like I said, it's a great thing. You can put your wits against us and show that we don't always know what we're talking about. We just make predictions. They're not always right, but so be it. All right. If nobody else has any questions, I think we'll call it a wrap there. But yeah, FP3 today will be 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, and then qualifying will be 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 a.m. Eastern. And tomorrow, race day, the pre-race will start at 10:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern, and then the race should turn green shortly after 10 p.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. Sunday morning Eastern time. So everybody, hope you had a great day. Hope you enjoyed the stream and were educational. If you have any questions or anything, reach out to Mike, and hopefully we'll be here next week to talk to you about a wrap up and what's happened in Formula One. Have a good day, folks.